This week in the enterprise security news, we're going to talk about Tapplock introducing a new enterprise fingerprint scanning padlock accessories. Will it be secure or not? Protecting corporations without sacrificing performance from Cloudflare, as well as acquisition news from S2 Systems, Pulse Secure, and SecureWave. Mimecast makes some acquisitions and more. In the second segment, we'll be talking about Docker container security, vulnerable upon inception, how you can improve the security of your Docker containers by looking at just one directive in the Docker file configuration file. In our final segment, we welcome back Britta Glade, the Director of Content and Curation for RSA Conference, and Linda Gray, the Senior Director and General Manager for the RSA Conference, to discuss what to expect at this year's RSA. Stay tuned for all that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. The Viavi Solutions Observer Platform provides SecOps teams a powerful combination of comprehensive data for threat hunting and incident response that includes wire data analytics and enriched flow records. Using pure, unaltered packet and net flow, Observer presents views across the entire IT infrastructure with threat alert features including scope, impact, and advanced traffic profiling. Teams can use automated workflows to dive into high-fidelity network evidence and more quickly resolve issues, minimizing impact on customers, users, and business operations. Learn more about the Viavi Network Security Solution and download free resources at securityweekly.com/Viavi. That's VIAVI. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly. It's episode 167 for January 8th, 2020. I'm your host, Paul Asadoorian, joined remotely by Mr. John Strand. John, welcome.
Good to be back after the holidays.
Absolutely. Mr. Matt Alderman is with us as well remotely. Matt, welcome.
Happy New Year, and it is now 2020, not 2020.
20? Isn't that the same?
Isn't that the same?
But just different
number.
Different.
Everybody's been saying 2000 since the Y2K, right? It's been 2000, 2001, up to 2019. My wife goes crazy because it's 2020. It's not 2000 we can just go 2020. We used to say 19 something, right? We didn't say 1900. Anyways.
I'm just happy that we can refer to this decade as the 20s now.
It's the roaring 20s.
It's the roaring
20s are back. Yeah.
That's it. Speaking of 2020, join us at InfoSec World 2020, March 30th through April 1st at the Disney Contemporary Resort. Security Weekly listeners get 15% off the InfoSec main conference or World Pass. Visit securityweekly.com/ISW 2020 and click the register button to register with our discount codes. Hey, Matt, you and I will be hosting a Container Security Day, which I'm already prepping for. In fact, you'll see a preview of some of that content on a segment on this show.
Yeah, and I covered part of it, I think, the last episode of last year. We talked a little bit about aspects of that as well. So some of that will come into that container security session on that Saturday before InfoSec World starts.
It's going to be a lot of fun. But this week, we've also got some news to discuss. And as we were saying just before the show, a lot of the product announcements, I think, are waiting for RSA to happen before they make public. So we do have a lot of acquisition news, but where'd you guys want to start?
Let's jump into Pulse Secure, because I don't know what the hell that's all about.
It sounds like zero trust microsegmentation. Is that? But what does that really mean?
But you know who Pulse Secure is, right? It's the old Juniper security product line that got spun out from Juniper a few years back. So it's basically the old SSL, VPN, and other products that were in the Juniper portfolio that are now part of Pulse Secure. Obviously, they've been rebranding a little bit around the zero trust discussion that we always like to poke fun at. But this is just a distributor announcement. It's like,
Yeah, and I'm finding out now that it's very, very, very easy. These particular partnerships are very easy to fall into. You basically sign a document and you're now partners. So,
yes,
pretty much.
Pretty much.
It's interesting. It's, the next evolution of VPN gets those buzzwords of zero trust and software-defined perimeter and all that stuff. And I think some of this technology is really good. I have not seen what Pulse Secure is doing.
Well, I think some of the technology ideas is really good, but the thing that bothers me is whenever I'm walking around conference floors and I start talking to these vendors about what zero trust actually is, the thing that concerns me the most is I get wildly different answers, and it really seems like they honestly do not know what zero trust means. And I don't think we have a quantifiable definition as far as what a zero trust network is going to look like. This is one of those things I would throw at Matt and say, hey, Matt, you should do a total presentation on what zero trust actually is. But I think it probably would take a lot of time and effort and thought to kind of put that together and kind of purely define what that world is.
And John, to your point, I think the interesting part is zero trust really about the network, or is it about the identity and the application, right? So what you see is a lot of recycled network technologies going after this concept of zero trust. But I'm not sure that zero trust is only about the network. I think it has to do a lot about the identity, the person, the machine, the app, or the application, right? Yeah. And it's that combination.
Edgewise has done a great job of showing our listeners what they mean by zero trust with respects to the application.
Mm-hmm. But I think that's the key, right? Is it seems like I find it interesting. I think we have an acquisition here for a UBEA vendor. We'll talk about that a little bit later. How a number of the vendors take a look at their existing technology portfolio. Something like zero trust comes out, and then they automatically start saying, "Well, yes, this is all zero trust." But I think it's impossible to have a zero trust infrastructure or an architecture if you do not have both the networking components and the actual applications. And honestly, I think moving forward into the future, I'd love to get you guys' opinion on this. It's going to completely reside in the application. I don't believe that when you're looking at networks as far as traditional network segmentation and firewalls, I think a lot of that is just going to start going away. And it's all going to have to reside in the application at some point.
In the application is with this technology is able to know which networks to trust and who over which network and which network ports to trust, right? It's taking that network aspect and basically building it into the application.
Well, and it's kind of like, Paul, you've been working a lot with containers and kind of, cloud infrastructure. And really, if you want to do it right, the application itself has to have a certain level of self-protection baked into it, because that thing's going to spin up. It may spin up someplace else. It may be outside of a particular network enclave. You may move it to another network enclave, maybe even a completely different cloud vendor as well. So I think that trying to solve this with just purely network level security is going to be somewhat difficult moving forward. So as I said, I don't think it's defined yet.
Not impossible.
Maybe this is something Matt and I can do for homework.
When you define your application, which is multiple services inside of whatever microsegmentation or container platform you're using, you define the network within, right? So you can define a different network. I was just looking at some config, like between your app server and your database, you can like build a new network inside of your entire app and make that completely separate. There was some advice I saw on that. I haven't done it or tested it yet, but because there's a lot of config. Like I said, we're talking about one in the next segment, one directive in a config file, right?
Just one.
Right. And that's why I always say app user data, app user data. See, I can control those three aspects, and zero trust is the combination of app user data. Yeah, the network may play, the endpoint may play to a point, but app user and data are those three control areas that I think will have the biggest influence on zero trust, not network and endpoint.
Yeah. Now, I do think there is a caveat to this. Like, we've been seeing a lot of vendors that are coming up with intelligent VPN solutions. And I think that from that perspective, I think you're going to see that network, but it's going to be that concept of it goes to the endpoint. The VPN is going to work specifically to the various applications. There's, of course, going to be a networking component because we know we're going to get hate mail as soon as we say the network's not going to be as important. But I think it ultimately ends up, and the focus has to be on the applications themselves. And the network can definitely support that, but the application has to be the core focus.
And so that's a good lead into the Cloudflare acquisition and announcement of Cloudflare for Teams, because again, that it's going after the network. It's like this expansion of your gateway and your access. It's basically a CASB, I think, is really what it is at the end of the day. But you see them make an acquisition to add some capabilities and now roll out this concept of Cloudflare for Teams, which also adds the gateway component in, back to the VPN discussion.
Yeah.
I just want to say, I really want a browser isolation system. I want my browser to live not on any of my computers. And there's lots of technology out there to do that. And really one driving factor for that is every news site I visit now tells me I have to disable my ad blocker. And I'm like, no, not doing that. Sorry.
No.
So I want it somewhere else where I don't have to have an ad blocker and, just send me screenshots of the articles or something, right?
There is a vendor that does that. And
we interviewed one, Authenticate. Authenticate is one.
Silo.
Yep.
There's another one that came from DoD. They actually started out as a T-Savvy solution where whenever you surf through the device, and I feel horrible, I don't know what the name of the company is, and I apologize, but it basically is showing you a video stream, and it's clickable within that video stream. And if you click the video stream, it actually, on the processors themselves that are virtualized browsers, it'll actually go to those sites. So it has this intermediary layer that's running in hardware, and it's awesome. It's really, really, really super cool. And they're always at IANS forums. I just can't remember the name of them off the top of my head.
Because you can't turn JavaScript off in your browsers today, because
as much as you want
not a single website will work anymore.
No,
it's really weird. Because when I look at the development frameworks, everything's being rendered in JavaScript now. So I'm like, that's off the table. Remember we used to run like no script and make that recommendation back in the day?
Well, it's funny. A lot of people say, well, the hacker that's breaking into our website was clearly going through Tor. Well, if they're running through Tor, and if you look at like Tor browser, like to secure Tor browser completely, they like shut off all these scripts. Like there's browsers like Dillo that don't allow JavaScript to execute and things like that. It basically shuts down like 98% of a website. So trust me, most attackers, they aren't attacking your website using Tor with the Tor browser because it's not going to work. Be effective for them. No, it's not at all.
Now, Bromium is more on your computer kind of thing, not
correct.
It is.
Not on. Yeah, that's what I got when I did the briefing with them. And that's great technology. I like Bromium's technology. I think it works great.
So, but I think you got to deploy Bromium in the proper location, right?
Yeah.
So the places where I see Bromium as very, very, very effective is just using an example like bank tellers. If you have a bank teller, they have a computer, they shouldn't be surfing the internet, but this allows them to do some of that stuff with a certain level of security and isolation, which I think is great. However, if you're in a dynamic environment, a general workplace environment, you have multiple applications, you're copying and pasting, you're doing all these different things. We see a large number of our customers that actually uninstall Bromium because the user population just can't use it.
Yeah, so and your configuration gets like so complex, right?
Yeah, and your configuration gets really complex. Now, all that said, I agree with you, Paul. I think Bromium is amazing. I think it's really, really, really cool. But yeah, user populations just don't seem to like it as much as I'd like them to.
And now, so Matt, what else happened with Cloudflare? They acquired S2 Systems, which is a browser isolation startup by former Microsoft execs, and they also announced a bunch of products as well. It has a ton of information in there.
Yeah, there's so much going on here.
Yeah, this is the Cloudflare for Teams, which is an access component back to zero trust identity and access, which we just kind of talked about a little bit on the identity side. And then the Cloudflare gateway, which to me looks a lot like kind of a VPN, right?
The next generation VPN.
Exactly. So at least they bring two of the pieces, at least a couple pieces together in their zero trust messaging, which is identity and network. But again, I think application and some other things ultimately fall into this bigger umbrella of zero trust, but a little broader than the previous announcement we just covered.
Yeah, and my only concern with the browser isolation is what happens when other applications act like a browser. And I'm sure there's could be answers for that, but when we look at the Outlook bug right, with the homepage in Outlook. I mean, it's basically acting like a browser, right? So your email clients can act like a browser. That's where I still see an avenue of attack, unless you just take it away from the users and they use a browser to get their email, which I don't know. I'm kind of split between, Gmail in Chrome and my thick clients, but
dude, even Outlook is just a skin of Edge. Honestly, that's all it is.
It's true. What else? We got some other acquisition in that type of news.
You want to go to the Symantec stories?
Yeah,
There's actually two of them. Yes. You missed one.
Broadcom Symantec Enterprise acquires a
Bay Dynamics.
Bay Dynamics. Yeah, we've interviewed Bay Dynamics before. Yep.
So I got a question on this. Is this pretty much an admission that the Symantec DLP solution was crap?
Yeah, that's
Can
a
we
good
now
point.
say that out loud?
That's a good point, right? Because Bay Dynamics has a DLP-like solution, or do they still call it a DLP solution?
They call it a DLP, but also UBEA.
Yes.
And I really, I actually didn't mind the Symantec DLP all that much, but yeah, I think bringing in user behavioral and entity analytics, user and entity behavioral analytics, is, this seems like it's a bit late to the game. But if they're going to buy a company, Bay Dynamics is pretty solid.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, so Bay Dynamics talks about this risk fabric and bringing all this data together to analyze. We've known for a while that the UEBAs were a feature, not a standalone product. And we've seen some consolidation in the space. This is just another example of it. What I find interesting, though, is when you look at this acquisition, also with the announcement that Accenture is buying the Symantec MSSP services business, I scratched my head for a second because I'm like, wait a minute, that's the old RipTech product, which they just sold to Accenture, but UEBA fits into the SIM model. So they buy a UEBA, but then sell the MSSP business? I'm completely confused.
They're kind of feeling like HP about 15 years ago. I don't know if you remember, but HP was like selling off its notebook and its desktop sales. And it's just, you didn't know what the hell is this company actually doing. And yeah, this doesn't make a lot of sense with what they've been doing lately.
Well, I mean, then HP bought a bunch of security products and then turned around and spun them all off to Micro Focus a couple of years ago to even confuse the story even more. And now you're seeing something kind of similar with what this Broadcom Symantec acquisition's looking like. They're acquiring certain pieces but selling off certain pieces. Obviously, there's a strategy somewhere to be a product company, I think, and that's why they sold the services business. I just would have expected the Bay Dynamics piece to fit really well into the RipTech portfolio as part of the MSSP, but they sell that to Accenture. So,
well, and I also wonder if it's not buying the customer portfolio. This sounds strange, but I actually go through a lot of these different companies like Bay Dynamics, and I look at who their customers are. And I've been working in this industry for a long time, trained a lot of people. And generally, when I look at customer portfolios, it's just like whatever. But if I'm looking at the customers that they're kind of highlighting, like NBC, specifically NBC, First Data, and UBS, I know a lot of the security team at those places. These guys aren't jokes. They aren't slouches, and they just don't blow money on crap. So I do wonder if there wasn't a little bit of being able to buy into the customer base as well.
Yeah, and Bay Dynamics gives them some additional capabilities outside of just the base UEBA, by the way. I mean, that's kind of the structure they were in, but they also did some threat and vulnerability management and some other things as part of this risk fabric concept. So there's probably some other pieces in here that might benefit the overall Symantec portfolio also.
Yep.
And sorry, Matt, did you say there was something else along these lines with Broadcom Symantec that we hadn't covered?
Yeah, I covered it. So Accenture, they sold the services business, which is the RipTech MSSP.
Yeah, I missed that part in there.
Yeah, that was acquired by Accenture this week as well. So it was just kind of weird timing. They buy a UEBA, but then they take their MSSP's business and they sell it to Accenture.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Let's see. Mimecast acquires yet another Israeli tech firm. They're just on a buying spree for Israeli cybersecurity firms.
Look, if you're going to buy a bunch of firms in a country, Israel's the place to be.
Agreed. So they bought a digital threat protection, Segasec? Segasec, I guess you could say. for your video game fans out there?
I was hoping it was the same company, but I was depressed to find out it's not.
It's not. It is not.
So I did a little bit of homework on Segasec or Segasec. What they're really going after is the digital properties for the company, right? So think of digital risk management. Some of the firms that have been doing that for a while, you got Digital Shadows and others. That's kind of the technology here. And it looks like Mimecast is going to integrate some of that digital asset risk protection in with the rest of the Mimecast capabilities from the email side, probably to validate certain digital assets and other things is part of their email phishing stuff. I'm not quite sure exactly how it's going to come together, but that's what Segasec was doing, kind of like Digital Shadows kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
Well, and some of the things that they do that I think are pretty cool is the smart deception. I've heard that what's actually going on under the hood is very similar to what Canary Tokens does, where you can put a tracker on specific parts of your website, and if it is actually like not compromised, if it's cloned for a spear phishing attack someplace else, you'll be able to see that very quickly, shut that down. So I'm just, Paul, we go way back in the deception game. It's just real cool to see deception being part of their portfolio. Agreed.
And I think that's a pretty valid way to help defend against at least some phishing attacks is knowing when your website is cloned somewhere, right? I mean, phishing's relied on that for like 20 years, basically.
So there's a huge one here. The Armis is just like, holy crap, that's
$1 billion.
Yeah, so the rumor, so I did a little more digging and I found the real story, right? Insight Partners bought it for $1.1 billion.
Gotcha.
So the rumor was a U.S. tech firm was looking at it. And so when you think of a U.S. tech firm, you're thinking Palo Alto, somebody like that can spend $1 billion. Insight Partners actually bought it for $1.1 billion on the 6th, 2 days ago. So the article, there was a press release done. It's the largest privately held Israeli acquisition to date. Paul, you and I have some experience with the Insight Partners because they also did a very big investment in Tenable prior to IPO.
Right, and we've done briefings with Armis as well. They've got great technology. They must have amassed some customers and had some revenue to get bought for $1 billion, I would imagine, right? I mean, you're not just throwing that kind of money around if they don't, have some signed POs maybe that they couldn't fulfill without some extra funding, right?
Yeah.
And Insight's been buying some other security properties as well. Similar to Thoma Bravo. I mean, I saw an article, Thoma Bravo just opened a new fund, which means, they're probably going to do some more acquisitions. But you've seen Insight after the Tenable acquisition get a little more involved in the cybersecurity space. And they've made a couple acquisitions in the last year now in this space. So again, kind of following a little bit of the Thoma Bravo model, bringing some of these security companies into the portfolio, grow them up, maybe take them IPO, spin them back out. Not quite sure. We know what happened with Tenable. We haven't seen what's happened with a couple of the other properties yet, so time will tell.
Yeah, it'll be interesting what Armis is actually up to, right? To have that much of a price tag be put on their company, right? Makes you wonder, like they have some government contract or something they can't fulfill without a lot of extra funding, right? And if you think about who's interested in IoT and device security, right? Government and critical infrastructure, certainly on that list and pretty high up. I saw Tapplock in the news, which was kind of interesting because about 2 years ago, I think Pentest Partners basically ripped apart these are physical locks we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And it's not just Pentest Partners, and a lot of other things have come out on how to bypass we covered it on Paul Security Weekly, which is how I recognize the name. And it ended up in the enterprise security news because they've got a new version that's targeted at enterprises that want to basically lock up things like laptops and other physical assets at your enterprise. And I'm just, if they haven't fixed any of the security issues and you're considering using them for anything physical security, make sure that you test them. And there's certainly tons of resources on the internet that'll show you probably 3 or 4 different ways to get around these locks, right? John, I mean, you've seen some of the research as well.
Yep. I do wonder, the Tapplock Box 2.0, if it's just basically they fixed the security vulnerability and put a new version on it. And like, no, that problem was 1.0. We got it right this time.
Right.
So yeah, and I haven't heard anybody in the industry working with them and doing security assessments. Not that I hear everybody that's getting tested, but I really, really hope if anybody was going to be buying a lot of these, I would get like a letter of attestation.
Yeah.
And basically say, before I spend thousands and thousands or millions of dollars on Tapplock across all of our fences and all of our locations, I would very much like to have a letter of attestation from a security firm going through what type of testing was done and what their findings were.
Yeah, I mean, because the locks are based on Bluetooth, and that can be dicey, right? Very much relies on the vendor implementation in terms of how secure it is.
It was really a crappy Bluetooth implementation, if I remember correctly, for the vulnerability.
Yeah.
But we need Larry to kind of dive into that a little bit more.
Absolutely. Well, maybe we get Larry one of these locks and take it out for a spin.
Go to town. Yes.
Here, Larry, have a lock. Thanks, guys. A lock and a pizza.
Yep. There was I don't know, John, did you read, you love the patent stuff. I always rely on you for when patent stuff. Apparently this is a win in the patent game for NetScout.
It was there was a patent, like a patent troll, right? Yep. That was basically just putting in crap patents and then going after companies. And it looks like they won. So
that's good.
What was it? It was
implicit's
what the patent
implicit.
was for.
Yeah, implicit's the patent troll. There's there's a history of this, right? They went after Palo Alto, Juniper, Trend, CA, NetScout. NetScout wins, right? So this is one of those patent trolls. It's just just pulling together all these patents and out trying to sue people and get money. In this case, NetScout wins, which is great for the industry, great for innovation.
Yeah.
But there is a history of this from this firm.
Well, and the other thing that's really cool is now that implicit has been called out for their shenanigans, it's going to make a much, much more difficult game for them to defend any other patents that they're going to try to defend in the future. So
yeah, I think that's good news for the industry as
and
well.
Also, let's also be honest, like hats off to NetScout for fighting it, because you know as well as I do, there's a lot of times you just look at it and like they want X number of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Screw it, just pay them.
Right.
It just, people cave all the time when it comes to patents. And I'm really, really, really happy that NetScout did not cave.
BigID raises $50 million. Let's see, the leader in privacy, data, discovery, intelligence, and automation. That's what they say.
BigID won the 2018 Innovation Sandbox at RSA conference on kind of the premise of GDPR coming. Now you have CCPA. So this company's had a lot of momentum since it won the Innovation Sandbox in 2018. What I find interesting is this is a $50 million raise 4 months after another $50 million raise. They've got $144 million into the business. A lot of money flowing into this company in some short timelines here.
Yeah.
So the question is, how efficient are they with the cash? How well are they growing? Are they succeeding from a revenue perspective, or are they just burning cash? Always an interesting question, but I like what they're doing.
Outstanding. So, that will conclude the news for this week. Stay tuned to learn about some Docker container security aspects. Well, at least one.